Good evening, everybody. We'll start the meeting. Can I please ask members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute to avoid feedback? Can I ask any remote participants to keep their cameras and microphones off unless they wish to speak? And ideally, don't put your camera on at all for the meeting. I have to advise you that the meeting may be recorded and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their SPC or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. So welcome to the meeting. Welcome to members of the Cabinet and visiting member and any members who are attending remotely, and also members of the public. The following staff are in attendance, either in the Council chamber or remotely: the Chief Executive, the Director of Resources, the Director of Neighbourhoods and Regeneration, the Monitoring Officer, the Interim Deputy Head of Legal Partnership, Head of Finance Procurement, Head of Planning, HR Manager, Revenue and Bens, a Manager, and Democratic Services. Are there any other officers who are actually attending that I've not named? Okay, the emergency procedure we know very well. There's no drill intended this evening, so you need to leave if there is a warning, either at that exit or staircase 1. I don't think we've got anybody within the chamber who is needing disabled help. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Mike Baldock. Thank you. Thank you.
The minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of December, can we agree they're an accurate record? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 391, 489 review of fees and charges, if we charge £130,000 for the repainting of existing white bar markings, we only need a couple of them. We're quids in, aren't we? It'd be more than we get from the council tax.
Are you suggesting there might need to be a correction?
I think it's probably £130, not 130,000.
Could you possibly confirm that, Resources Director?
I can confirm it. Yes. The type of the correct amount is listed in the paragraph just above that. Yes, and that does need amending.
Well spotted. Otherwise, with that correction, do we agree the minutes? Excellent. Okay. So I need to advise you that the agenda items 4 and 5 are minutes to go, recommendations to go to the council. Before we start the meeting, I'd just like to say something about former councillor and former mayor twice, and Alderman Colin Prescott. I know that a good press release has gone out, and I obviously expect that at the next full council meeting, the proper acknowledgement of his role for the council will be made. But I'd just like to say 2 or 3 things, and some of you will have not been on the council with Colin Prescott. So three things to say about him. One is he was a very good ward councillor. He was councillor for East Downs, and a lot of us, as it were, on our side of the chamber, probably thought that, well, East Downs is a safe Conservative seat, and you know anybody could win it. But actually, Colin did put a lot of effort into serving the interests of the ward, There's a massive number of parish councils in that ward, which makes it a very, very hard job. And I think he carried that out very conscientiously and was very good at keeping his ward members aware of what was going on. The second thing I say, he was definitely a Conservative. There's no doubt about that. But he was extremely collegiate, I think, within the council. So I mean, he talked to Councillor Harrison and things like that, and he even talked to me on occasions. And although he was a Conservative, he certainly was not averse to criticising the Conservative administration. Yeah, okay. And the third thing I'd say about him was he actually was a bit of a star on the planning committee, which, you know, is a thing I think he most enjoyed doing. And the thing I didn't always agree with what he said. Well, why would you? But he was very good when, you know that thing where the gallery is full of people who don't want a decision to go in a particular way and make it very clear that they don't. And some members may be sometimes pressurized by that. Well, Colin actually enjoyed putting them right. So whatever argument they put forward, he would be bound to reject it. And actually, I think quite relished it. So once again, it's very sad that we, we lose a member, but this who's been a key member of this council, but it does happen fairly frequently. So I have forgotten to ask if there's any declarations of interest, and there are. So first we'll take Councillor Bonney, then Councillor Palmer, and then the visiting member, Councillor Whiting.
Thank you. I'm not sure which item it's going to be, but there's an urgent item. So I want to declare a DPI, so I shall leave the room as I have a rateable property.
Mine's the same on the same agenda item. It's a disclosure of pecuniary interest. I run a local business which I have a controlling factor in, and it would be inappropriate to take part in this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And just to say, the item will be the last item, so you two can have an early, break. Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chair. And I hadn't intended to speak at all tonight, but your comments about Councillor Prescott, the former Councillor Prescott, can I just, from the Conservative point of view, there will be time to talk about this at full council, I'm sure, but I do, on behalf of the Conservative camp, welcome the views you made. I think that Councillor Prescott made an enormous contribution to this council, including his time as mayor. And I would just like to express, if I may, on behalf of Cabinet tonight, and I'm not part of Cabinet, but I hope you will support me, our deepest sympathies to Pamela, his widow at this time, and thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Of course we do, particularly those of us who knew him very well. And I think Councillor Lloyd Bowen would like to come in.
Thank you, Leader. Actually, I didn't realise Councillor Whiting was there. He said what I was going to say. Thank you. So thank you very much.
Okay, good. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the Treasury Management Strategy. As you're all aware, this encompasses the way we borrow and the way we invest. I think this is a very sound strategic report from our officers. I'll just make a few observations, really. Clearly, interest rates are going to go up to deal with the growing level of inflation in the economy. Our approach, obviously, is to borrow at low risk and to invest at low risk as well, and ensure that when we do borrow, that we can actually meet any borrowing costs. For the present, our preference is to enable borrowing through the use of internal borrowing, because that at the moment is the best way of ensuring the lowest cost to us. As the report says, we can't borrow in order to invest, in order to create an income. That is not allowed. We, of course, have borrowed quite considerably, not as much as other councils, of course, for the Sydenham Town Centre, but that is a regeneration investment rather than investment for income. And indeed, that's pretty much how it's turning out. And our investments are based on safety and with the use of cash flow and short-term investments. So I commend this to the Cabinet and thank the officers for the soundness of the strategy going forward. We'll take any questions if anybody's got any questions. So the recommendation is to approve. Oh, you've got a question, Councillor Harrison.
Always used to. It was on page 7. I mean, I've read it a few times, but it's not really stuck in my mind. It says, approved sources of long-term and short-term borrowing are UK public and private sector pension funds, except the Kent Pension Fund. Just think, well, is there something wrong with that? Is there something wrong with the Kent Pension Fund that we can't borrow from it? Or haven't they got their money back from Iceland yet?
I can't answer the second bit, but as we are a member of the Kent Pension Fund, we'd kind of be lending to ourselves, so we need to keep our distance from that.
Caters, hands please. I'll propose that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Harrison seconding, and the vote is unanimous. Right. Okay, we move on to agenda item 5, which is the revenue budget and the medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. This is the budget that we need to take to council in a couple of weeks. We've been over several iterations of it, and even though it's a changed situation from where we were on 8th December, I've explained that several times at various meetings over the last month or so. But we do need to minute where we are. So I will just make a few comments on the report. Paragraph 2.2 notes the impact of the financial settlement, which is an overall increase of 984,000 on our speculative thoughts about what the settlement might be. We need to note the 1 year only aspect to these increases. So we do desperately need, as the whole of local government does, much more clarity about future funding. It's not good that we met on the 8th of December to produce our budget, but we didn't find out so much later in December what our settlement would be, and that's not really satisfactory. It's welcome that we came in with more income than we expected, but that again is not really how you should be preparing a budget. And that on one instance, on the new homes bonus, we didn't even know whether it's going to come at all. We're just basing it on history. Now, if we balance that against the increased costs, the outcome is that we're able to reduce the requirement to get to a balanced budget by using a reserve by 665,000. That's reducing what we had in December at 2.316, which, you know, as I've said several times earlier in the year, was over 3.7. It's to 1.651, which is pretty much like many other local authorities, and is not dissimilar to where we've been in the past. To meet that, we'd already established a council tax contingency fund, a budget contingency fund of £2 million. So we're all pretty familiar with this, the substance of this report. We'll go to the recommendations, but before that, we've got two recommendations from scrutiny that we must consider. So let's take the first one first. That the appropriate committee, post-May 2022, consider the creation of an intermediate fee between minor and major applications for pre-application advice. Review the whole pre-application advice charging structure, and charges for individual households are also considered. So to be clear, that is, we're not aware at this point what the appropriate committee would be, and we would have to take into account the impact of any change on the overall budget. So I think it's feasible for such a committee to consider these matters, but I can't see that it would be safe or sound to actually make the changes within the year when we've already established the budget and the importance of income from various sources as part of the budget. Would you like to comment, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Amendments to fees and charges across the board can be done during the year, but as you've said, any budget implications will need to be taken into account. So any decisions that are taken will need to address the overall budget framework, and if there is a negative impact, then compensating savings will need to be found. So although it is possible, it might be that this committee considers it for introduction in 23-24.
Correct. So I think it'd be quite feasible for us to take this forward, but without a commitment to make a change if the judgment is that it actually affects the overall budget that we've agreed. So I've got Councillor Harrison. I think I've got Councillor Bonney as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I listened to the discussion at scrutiny, and I also attended scrutiny in this chamber when we discussed the fees and charges previously. And when we discussed it previously, that particular section, we had a table with comparisons to all the other boroughs and district councils in Kent. We had a very considerable discussion at that scrutiny committee on that table and the charges that we were putting in, because we actually increased one of them quite considerably. But we did have a considerable discussion on that whole area. So I listened to scrutiny whenever it was last week, losing track of the days. So I listened to that and thought, do you not remember discussing this in great detail the year before? Because I think if that sort of thing you discuss in great detail every now and again to make sure that you're in the right place. But and of course it's entirely up to members in the future what goes to each of these committees. You know, any member can put something forward to, you know, to go on the agenda. But I do think that having a major debate on that sort of thing every single year is just having it there for the sake of having it there. I think we had a big discussion at the cabinet meeting, then we had a big discussion at that scrutiny meeting, and then it came back to cabinet. So I fail to see why the need to keep discussing it year after year after year. So no, I you know, if people want to put it forward in the new committee system, that's fine. I don't see that we should be recommending that it be done. It should be raised every couple of years to make sure we're in line with other boroughs and district councils in Kent, or indeed elsewhere in the country, if that's what we want to look at. But we can't get into the business. We can't get into the business of having a major look at that. We'll be spending all of our time on fees and charges. We'll be doing nothing else.
Okay, Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I was going to say a similar point to Councillor Harrison. I do remember looking at those comparables, and I think we even went as far afield as Birmingham for major applications, see what beyond Kent, to see what those fees and charges are. So I don't think right now is the right time. Of course, a committee going forward could always look at that.
Okay, Councillor Palmer.
I'll try and be brief because I think it's already been said. I tend to agree with what Councillor Harrison and Monique said, Councillor Bonney said towards the end, is we're changing to a committee system. And if this wants to be looked at by the relevant committee, then that's free to do so. And they're free to put a report to full council, and it's for full council to then decide. I don't think it's right that cabinet makes a decision and says that a committee must be looking at something when they can call it in themselves. Thank you.
I think that is the key point. It's, in a way, if this is for the committee system, it's for the committee then to decide whether they wish to consider introducing an intermediate charge. Yes.
The fees are looked at annually anyway by officers when we're producing the proposals to bring to relevant committees. So it's not something that is just ignored.
Okay. I've got Councillor Martin and Councillor Valentine to come in.
Lovely. I think the nail has been hit on the head in terms of it is a matter for the committees as to whether they look at it and what they want to look at. What I would urge is a little bit of caution in that after the scrutiny committee, I thought I'll have a look. Does any council in the country have an intermediate planning policy? They don't. And there's probably a very sensible reason for it. And no doubt when you go through the definitions, you probably find that the definitions of what is a major and what is a very major and what is a minor are set out somewhere in the planning policy guidance documents, and intermediate isn't included in them. So I would urge that members, before they bring it to any committee, do double check whether it's something that can actually be done.
Thank you. That's a very cogent point. And lastly, Councillor Valentine.
Thank you, Chair. I did attend remotely all 6 hours of the scrutiny committee, but I can't entirely remember what the concern that's driving this was.
Well, it was a concern that a member had that there was too big a jump from minor to major applications in terms of the fee, and the member concerned thought that there was a case for an intermediate. So it's not about the fees that we make, it's about whether there should be a intermediate depending on the size of development. So that's the point it's making. It's very interesting what Councillor Martin says, that would set us apart from practically every other.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. Mike, I was saying that if we introduced an intermediate category, presumably that the effect of that would be to reduce the overall income from it, because some things that would have been major would now be intermediate, presumably at a lower fee. But charges for individual householders would increase it. So I just, in the way the recommendation is drafted, it's just not clear what the intentional concern is. That's quite what it's made. Okay,
we've had a discussion, and you don't seem to have a very positive view of this particular recommendation. Can I have a proposal from somebody, please? Councillor Palmer.
I propose that we don't progress the recommendation.
Seconder. Okay, let's have a vote on that then. Thank you. All right. Now, the second recommendation was that the fee for replacement bins be removed, and you do have a report tabled on that from Councillor Saunders. Would you be good enough to speak to this, please, Councillor Saunders?
Okay, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I listened to the concerns raised by members of the Scrutiny Committee very carefully, and I obviously note the recommendation that came from the committee. I do accept that we need to do as much as possible to mitigate any problems that this new charge will cause to residents. And I think in particular, we need to learn from other local authorities that have successfully introduced this charge. But my view remains that we do need to introduce the charge because of the financial pressures that we're facing as a council. If you look at table 2 of the report, it shows very clearly that the cost of providing replacement bins is rising quite rapidly. And as the report says, for this year, there's a budget pressure of £150,000. And that is only being eased by a reserve, which will run out by the end of next financial year. Introducing the charge we're proposing will provide a contribution towards replacement costs, but it will also have the benefit of dampening down demands for new bins. You'll see in the report that our contractor suggests that there is some evidence of properties having multiple bins. It will also promote a more sustainable approach amongst residents to caring for their bins. As you can see on the front page of the report, the majority of local authorities in the Kent County Council area have already introduced charges, and in fact most of those charges are higher than what we're proposing. The concerns that were raised at scrutiny seem to relate to the practicalities of introducing the charge and its potential impact on residents. And since the scrutiny meeting, officers have done more work in terms of developing processes, and particularly have drawn on the experience of other local authorities that have already introduced these charges. So key points I wanted to draw your attention to on the table to paper in terms of practicalities are that bins that are damaged by our contractor will still be replaced free of charge, and that there aren't any charges for food or garden waste bins, that a set of a kind of set of advice will be given and prepared on minimising the risk of theft and loss of bins, that there will be a process in place to override the fee in very exceptional circumstances, and that there will be a very close initial monitoring of the scheme in the first 12 months in order to inform future proposals for fees and charges. It's also worth emphasising that there will be a firm approach taken where properties don't present waste in the required way. In terms of cost, I think it's worth emphasising that the fee is one of the lowest in the county, and that it serves as a contribution to recovery costs, and that the cost of purchasing an alternative container independently would be far higher. So in conclusion, although I think there will be some challenges in introducing this charge, I feel it's very much the responsible thing for us to do because of the cost implications of not doing it being so significant. Thank you.
Other members, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Martin. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, a couple of sort of points, questions. Obviously, the scrutiny committee we were just there to answer questions, but some of the points that came up there were a bit concerning, like, will people leave their bin in the street? Well, actually, if you look at the rules, and I was here when they were introduced, you put your bin at the front of your property, or which in some cases is the street, because they're terraced houses and they front onto the pavement, and then you take it back afterwards round to your back garden. Bins are not supposed to be left in the street permanently. If they are, the enforcement staff are supposed to give you a letter 1 week, I think a fortnight later, letter 2, and a fortnight later, letter 3, which says, if it ain't gone, we're going to remove it. And if people took responsibility for taking their bins back round to their own property, that would minimise loads of bins being left in the street and one suddenly disappearing. Because I think where they're out permanently, it's very easy for somebody to appropriate one. And my second point is, if the contractors know that a number of households have acquired 2 bins, albeit one might be used for some sort of storage, then surely, as they are our bins, we should be repatriating them back so that householders only have 1 bin, because that is the rule, apart from a few special cases where people have a smaller bin for a specific reason. And the third point was, I was a bit concerned to hear that some residents have to present their bin not outside their property, but down the road and round the corner from their property. And I just thought, well, that, you know, it's easy to go, isn't it? I mean, how can you keep an eye on it? Having said that, mine goes outside my property, as with my neighbours. It's got a huge number on it. And he's vanished one day. Literally went down the street checking, but there was no sign of it, you know. So whether it got ate, our people didn't know. And I think that is another issue, that, you know, the contractors do need to be a bit more on the ball here. Because if your machine eats my bin, you should make a note of it. Don't say, oh, I don't know, I don't remember that, which is what we're getting at the moment. Thank you. Sorry, what I should have said is that I'm really pleased with this report, and it's a pity that we couldn't, no disrespect, but it's a pity that this sort of information couldn't have come forward a bit sooner, as this was a new sort of area that we were looking at. But it's really, it's really useful. Thanks.
Well, I hear that, but in the whole budget, we can't necessarily anticipate where the issues are actually going to rise. And you're right, this is a very good report prepared by Councillor Saunders and Mr. Cassell in a very short period of time. Councillor Martin.
Lovely, thank you, and thank you to Councillor Saunders and to Mr. Cassell for preparing the report. I think it's worth pointing out that on table 1, any one of those councils is not recovering the potential full cost of wheeled bins. Wheeled bins currently can be selling for up to £60. Now, straight away, you know that a £30 charge is therefore not covering the full cost of a replacement bin. It's also worth noting that we're not planning on charging for those bins utilised for the recycling of food waste and garden waste, which does again set us apart somewhat from some of the others, and that we do, of course, charge developers for a full set of bins when a new house is developed. It is a case that the reserve will run out. You can't continue to rely on it. It is one-off money. It will not exist again. It will not replenish itself magically. It's not a magic money tree reserve. It is a fixed reserve. And we have been raiding it quite heavily over the last few years to pay for new bins, and that's unsustainable. This is a sensible policy change. It is a fee that will enable us to continue to offer replacement bins without reaching the point where we have to charge our residents the full commercial rate, and therefore I fully support and endorse the Cabinet member on this one.
Okay, any more speakers? Councillor Valentine.
Yeah, I want to add my support for the charge. I think it's necessary in terms of the budget and regrettable, but necessary that we introduce it. And as the Cabinet member points out, puts us in the sort of lower half of the table for Kent authorities on the charges for these bins. I would suggest that the charge is referred to as an administration or well, a fee for the administration and investigation of replacing the bins. If the bins do go in the back of the lorries, they all have CCTV on them now, so it is possible to investigate and establish whether a bin has been lost. And I think we should make the point that the bins remain the property of Swale Borough Council.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Saunders, do you want to make a proposal? And we've got a seconder.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we carry on with the charge.
Yes, okay. A seconder? Councillor Valentine. So those in favour of that? Okay, that's clear, and that makes the budget as it is sustainable. The whole report, you're all familiar with it. We've been through it several times. So can I propose that, and this is what has got to go to full council. So I'm proposing that we agree en bloc recommendations 1 to 7. Agreed? Okay, thanks. Item 6 is the STG Building Control Partnership Business Plan for 2022 to 2025. We're asked to agree it and to agree to continue as a STG partner authority in a 4th term. I would have anticipated Councillor Baldock as the Cabinet member for planning to introduce this for us. I think you're all familiar with the contents of this. I propose that we accept these recommendations, but if there are any comments or questions, I think we've got James Freeman available if it's necessary for any questions. Right, that's seconded. So, agreed? Page do I need to be on? No, it's the procurement report. Bear with me. Page 99. I could have started a dialogue about Peppa Pig while I was trying to sort my pages out. Okay, so this is the procurement of agency staff services, and we're asked the Cabinet approves the appointment of Matrix SCM Limited as the recommended provider for vendor neutral agency service provision for an initial 3-year period with an option to extend for 2 years. Again, from the chair, I propose that we agree this. We got a seconder? Do we have any questions? Okay, so can we indicate whether we agree or not? Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to the end of what was the intended agenda, but we've got an extra item, the NNDR COVID Additional Relief Funding Scheme, which two members, a couple of entrepreneurs in the Cabinet are now going to leave us. The reason for bringing this forward is that we want to dispense with this fund in the present financial year. We didn't actually get any indication as to the criteria until quite late. And so this has been brought forward so that we can do that. The report indicates to you the proposal in 3.1 indicates the type of properties that we wish to support. This is to support those businesses that otherwise were not supported in the more formal structure. Should we have Zoe Kent first? Zoe Kent, would you like to articulate this, please, for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for listing this item for us. So this is the additional relief funding. The regulations or the guidance only came out in December. With we had to wait for the frequently answered questions to come out in January to actually put the policy together. So a lot of businesses have had help through the extended retail relief. So they are excluded from receiving any relief through this scheme. And we've thought about it for a long time, and we've come up with 40% relief to be awarded to businesses that have been adversely affected by COVID. So the types of businesses that we've removed are the likes of solicitors and accountants, who we feel are less likely to have been adversely affected. We need to get this in during the current financial year. It is for this financial year, so that we can get it on out to businesses before we bill for 22-23. We've got a contingency of 5%. So if any businesses that we've put on the list of people that won't receive help towards their rates, they won't receive the relief. If somebody comes forward, they can provide their accounts to show us they were adversely affected, and then we will look to award them the same percentage as relief from their rates. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think if you read the report, you can recognise the reasoning behind things. You'll understand that this is another area where our officers have had to add to their normal core work in order to put this together. I think they've done that very conscientiously, and the argument put that we need to agree this now is a very strong one. So again, from the chair, I propose that we approve this. Councillor Martin.
A brief question, and then I'm happy to second, but it is a very brief comment, really. It's disappointing that yet again, during this period, yes, we're getting the support to give to businesses, but we're not getting the guidance in time to do it effectively. Every time over the last 2 years that we've had another scheme issued, we're getting, oh, the public announcement on day one, and then 2 months later we might get the guidance, and then we're getting a week to apply for it. It's getting ridiculous, and I hope that people will feed that back to the senior members of their party who are here today, and hopefully as we go forward we'll start getting a little bit more joined up thinking from central government when they're running these programmes, and get the guidance and facts out before the announcements. Other than that, I'm happy to second the work that's been done. Right,
thank you. I'll take cabinet members and then I'll come back to Councillor Whiting. Councillor Valentine.
In the table on 3.1, which is the list of businesses to be excluded, on the right hand side there's property types excluded. I'm a little bit puzzled by the photovoltaic installation. And it's not a property type, and it seems very specific. Why would you exclude photovoltaic installation and not electrical installation generally, or construction generally?
So Zoe, can you explain that to?
Yes, of course. So the two headings, I'm afraid that's how they're listed on our system. They're broken down. One is codes that we have within our system, and one are codes that come through from the Valuation Office Agency. So that's why they're listed in two lists. They are our solar farms that are listed, and we felt it was likely that they weren't adversely affected by COVID.
Yeah, no,
That's understandable now.
absolutely understandable. I thought it was the installers you were referring
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
not the sites. I understand now.
Okay, so thanks for that. Got Councillor Harrison.
Thanks. Similar to Councillor Martin, when I read this and it said on the 25th of March 21, the funding was announced and the guidance come out in December, 15th of December, and I thought that must be wrong. And then to be told tonight by Zoe that the actual FAQs by which you can't move forward without didn't come in till January. You know, I don't know one council in this country that's got staff sitting around waiting to do stuff that's coming out from government. It's really good that they're giving the money, but if you can announce it on the 25th of March, surely you can get the paperwork through a bit quicker than 9 months, 10 months later. And our staff should be applauded for the amount of time and effort they've clearly put in to get this before us tonight. You know, they're clearly, well, all the way through with these, the Revs and Bens and the economic development staff have really put themselves out and gone above and beyond to actually put the paperwork through, sort the paperwork out so that people can apply for the various funds that have been given to us. And I particularly liked, because it doesn't seem to be important to other people, but I particularly liked the fraud bit, because I know that we do take fraud at Swale Borough Council very seriously, and we try and do that due diligence to the best of our ability. And it's a pity that other people don't seem to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think probably, Zoe, that you've been working on this for much longer than just December, but the work had to be done in a sort of speculative way, not entirely clear what the outcome's meant to be. Is that a fair comment?
Well, my answer is actually, Chair, that we couldn't put any work into it until December, but during the time between March and December, we were working on the business rate grants, and we were also delayed by this because we were told we were given guidance that the business rate grants, the hospitality grants had to go out in a timely manner, so those went out in January, and then during that time we were working on the policy.
Thank you. And continuing this sort of theme, members will be concerned that the strain on our administration that will come out of having to pay the energy discounts to people. I think people in central government must imagine that we do have lots of Zoes sitting around with nothing to do, and would they like to carry out central government policy for them? So that is another real headache, and it does actually take away from the work that we want people to do on behalf of this council and this community to do the work of central government. You know, I'm not going to discuss whether that's the best way of giving support to people either. Right, Councillor Whiting.
William, obliged to you, Chairman. It's a very quick one. I congratulate the team from Lewisham downwards in getting the grants they've got out to those that qualify for them. And I think that's been an enormous job of work over the last 2 years. And I think they can hold their heads up high that they've done that in an extraordinary manner. And I think they've achieved better in many ways than other authorities in Kent. And it's with that in mind that I just make the comment. We've heard tonight how many times we're judging ourselves, or the administration judges itself against the performance of other authorities. It is a shame, in a way, that in this report we are not giving details about what other authorities have achieved around the county. And we've heard from various cabinet members, if I may, that other authorities up and down the land have done A, B and C, and we've done better. on this case, there is nothing in the report that says Swale is above or below what might be considered a national average. And I think that's quite regrettable because, as I say, I think the team have done extraordinarily well in doing what they've done. But tonight here, we seem to be, from Councillor Martin and Councillor Harrison, kind of knocking the government for giving money and giving very little time, which that's fine. I have no objection to that. But we're not actually comparing ourselves in this respect to other authorities up and down the country and how well or how badly they have responded to the short notice that this government and previous governments have given to this kind of funding pot. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that. And thank you for your commendation of the staff who literally have had a very, very hard task to fulfil over the last couple of years. I think, you know, we do like to see how we're doing compared with others. Of course we do. We're very pleased that we're so high up the climate emergency agenda across the country. I'm not sure in this instance what the quantitative data would be appropriate to comparing whether our policy for distributing this compares with others. I'm not sure that could be a measured thing, and we could try to find that out, but I don't think that is very productive. I think the fact is we understand that our officers have had to work very hard on this in a very short period of time, and I doubt whether they're researching whether it's done better in Worksop or Fylde or Workington. Would actually be very illuminating. Okay, I propose that the COVID Assistance Relief Scheme, Appendix 1, is approved. All those in favour, a seconder, I better have a seconder. I like Councillor Saunders this time. So those in favour, and that's approved. So that's good news, Zoe, Kent, and Director. Okay, and I think that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much for all the people who've attended virtually. Thank you.